Ever been pushed to your breaking point, only to discover that's where your real power begins? This is the story of a woman who was publicly humiliated, betrayed, and cast aside. But in the ashes of her old life, she found the fire to build an empire. The ballroom was a glittering ocean of crystal chandeliers and soft jazz, where every glass of champagne caught the light like molten gold. Laughter floated above the clinking of cutlery, the room thick with the perfume of wealth. Notes of aged Scotch, gardenias, and ambition. Men in tailored tuxedos spoke in low, self-assured voices, while women in sequined gowns leaned in just close enough to be seen and envied. Near the center, under a halo of light, stood Marcus Thorne, the man everyone had come to see. He was tall, perfectly composed, with the kind of smile that convinced bankers to sign blank checks. On his arm tonight, deliberately, possessively, was Sienna Vance, 24, the living embodiment of ambition in a champagne-colored dress that clung like a whispered scandal. She laughed at something Marcus said, her hand brushing his sleeve as though she had every right to be there. And she did, at least in Marcus's mind. Across the polished marble floor, the heavy double doors opened without announcement. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Isabella Rossi Thorne stepped in. 6 months pregnant, her midnight blue gown flowed over the gentle swell of her belly, her dark hair cascading in waves that caught the light. She wasn't supposed to be here. Her name hadn't been on the guest list. Marcus had made sure of that. From a distance, you might think she had come to support her husband. Up close, you could see it. The faint tremor in her hand, the slight quickness of her breath. Her heart was pounding so loudly she could almost hear it over the music. She didn't belong to this world anymore. Not in his eyes. But she wasn't here for him. Not really. She had imagined this moment on the ride over, gripping the leather seat in the back of the town car, the city lights blurring past. The air outside had been cold, but the heat in her chest was a steady, controlled burn. She remembered when Marcus used to look at her the way he now looked at Sienna, like she was both the prize and the future. That memory was a knife she had learned to hold without cutting herself. Marcus saw her before she reached him. For a heartbeat, his charming smile faltered. Then, in front of 100 guests and a dozen reporters, he stepped away from Sienna. His jaw tightened. "What are you doing here?" he hissed under his breath when she was close enough to hear. "I'm your wife," she said softly, though her voice carried just enough to draw the attention of those nearby. The words hit him like a challenge, and Marcus Thorne did not tolerate challenges. His hand moved before his mind caught up, a sharp, open-handed crack that echoed through the ballroom. The sound seemed to suspend in the air, louder than the music, louder than the gasps that followed. Her head snapped to the side. For a moment, all she could register was the heat on her cheek and the ringing in her ears. Around them, silence swallowed the room. Champagne flutes hung frozen in midair. Conversations cut mid-sentence. Somewhere in the back, a camera shutter clicked. Inside, 1,000 thoughts collided in her skull. You've done it in private before, but now you've made it public. The sting on her skin was nothing compared to the weight in her chest. It was a mixture of humiliation, rage, and something sharper, something useful. Sienna's eyes darted between them, her lips curling into a smirk she tried to hide behind her glass. That was when Isabella knew. Marcus wanted the world to see her diminished. He wanted them to believe she was powerless. She straightened slowly, her fingers brushing the edge of the table beside her, grounding herself. She could feel the baby shift inside her, as if reminding her she wasn't alone. She met Marcus's gaze, and for a fleeting second, he looked uncertain. She tucked that away. Uncertainty was an opening. Her mind began to work. She thought of the documents in her study drawer, of the board members she had cultivated friendships with back when she was still Mrs. Thorne in more than just name. She thought of Marcus's arrogance, his belief that she had no power left because she had no seat at his table. He had forgotten that she had helped build the table in the first place. From the far side of the room, a murmur began to rise. Polite whispers breaking into open commentary. A society columnist scribbled furiously in a leather-bound notebook. The band had stopped playing. All eyes were on them, on her. Marcus leaned in, his breath laced with whiskey. "Go home, Izzy, now before you embarrass yourself further." She didn't move. "Oh, I won't be the one embarrassed," she murmured just loud enough for him to hear. On the surface, she was calm, almost serene. Inside, her pulse was a war drum. She could still taste copper at the back of her throat, her body vibrating with the urge to cry or to scream. Instead, she forced her mind to the next step. She couldn't let the anger decide her moves. She had to let the anger fuel them. She stepped back, not in retreat, but in control, letting the weight of the moment hang there. The reporters would spin this in the morning, but she already knew what the headline would be. She would make sure of it. The chandeliers above cast halos over the heads of the wealthy. Yet, the brightest light in the room now was the spotlight on them. The golden couple undone in a single moment. And in that light, Isabella decided something Marcus would never see coming. She smiled. Not the brittle smile of a humiliated wife, but the measured smile of someone already pulling the first thread of a plan. The crowd began to buzz again, the incident breaking into fragments of speculation. Sienna touched Marcus's arm, whispering something meant to soothe him. But Isabella was already turning toward the door. Every step was deliberate, as though she were walking away from a fire she had no intention of putting out. She didn't need to stay and fight here. The real battle was elsewhere, and it had already begun. By the time Marcus woke up tomorrow, he wouldn't just remember the slap. He'd remember the moment he realized she wasn't the victim he thought she was. The cold night air wrapped around Isabella as she stepped out of the ballroom, the heavy doors closing behind her with a muffled thud. Outside, the city skyline stretched like an unending constellation of ambition. Towers of glass and steel, each window a flicker of someone else's story. Her heels clicked against the marble steps, each sound sharper than the slap still stinging on her cheek. She didn't head for the car immediately. Instead, she stood at the edge of the Grand Hotel's driveway, one hand resting instinctively on her belly. The baby shifted again, a gentle nudge from the inside, grounding her in the present. This child was her anchor now, her reason for every calculated breath. Her mind, however, drifted backward. Years peeled away like old wallpaper, revealing a younger Isabella Rossi standing in the shadow of Columbia University's architecture building, portfolio in hand, rain in her hair. She had been 23 then, hungry, brilliant, and certain she would leave her mark on the city. She'd met Marcus at a fundraiser for urban housing, a man already known for flipping failing developments into gold. He'd been magnetic, a storm contained in a bespoke suit with eyes that didn't just look at you, they assessed you. Back then, she had believed his attention was admiration. Now she knew it had been something else entirely. Recognition. Marcus had seen her potential, and he had wanted to harness it, bend it into the shape of his own empire. She remembered the first year of their marriage when they had co-designed his company's headquarters. They'd spent nights sketching side by side, laughing over takeout cartons, their hands brushing as they passed blueprints back and forth. The building still bore her design signature. An atrium of light and air in the center, a symbolic heart, she'd insisted on. Buildings need souls, she had said. Then Marcus had agreed. But over the years, the soul had been bled out, both from the building and from their marriage. Her body remembered the smaller humiliations long before tonight's public one. The way Marcus had started correcting her at dinners with clients as though she were a junior employee. The whispered phone calls that ended when she entered the room. The lingering scent of Sienna's perfume on his cufflinks. Each one had been a brick in the wall he was building between them. The wind tugged at her hair, snapping her back to the present. A sleek black sedan pulled up, the driver stepping out to open the door. She slid into the back seat, the leather cool against her skin. "Home, Mrs. Thorne?" the driver asked. "Not yet," she said, her voice steady. "Take me to the office." The driver hesitated for a fraction of a second. Marcus had forbidden her from company matters months ago, but he simply nodded and pulled into traffic. As the car wove through the city, Isabella's thoughts shifted to the here and now. The slap had been Marcus's mistake, not just morally, but strategically. He'd given her a public incident, something tangible, something the media could sink their teeth into. And Marcus feared bad press almost as much as he feared losing control. She would use both. The phone in her clutch buzzed. She pulled it out to see a message from Marcus Hale, her attorney. "Saw the footage. We move tonight." Her fingers hovered over the screen. Tonight? It was sooner than she had planned. But then again, the best moves were the ones your opponent didn't see coming. She typed back, "Yes. Begin the calls." She could almost hear him smile through the reply. "On it." Her gaze drifted to the window where the city blurred into a tapestry of neon and shadow. She thought of her father, a carpenter who had died before seeing her graduate, and her mother, who had taught her that dignity was not something you begged for. It was something you protected, even if it meant walking away with nothing but your name. Isabella had learned that lesson young. She'd almost forgotten it in the golden years with Marcus, when love had been enough to make her believe in permanence. But permanence, she knew now, was an illusion. What lasted was what you built for yourself, and what you were willing to fight for. The car slowed in front of the Thorne Development building, its facade a gleaming testament to their shared past. Her chest tightened at the sight of it. She had poured her vision into every line of its design, imagining it as a monument to partnership. Now it was a fortress she intended to storm from the inside. Inside the lobby, the security guard looked up, startled. "Mrs. Thorne." Mr. Thorne isn't here." "I know," she said, offering a calm smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm not here for him." She rode the elevator to the 27th floor, the one with her old office, now officially unused, unofficially untouched. When the door slid open, the familiar scent of cedar shelves and lemon polish met her. Her desk was as she had left it months ago, a silent reminder that Marcus had never quite erased her from this place. She crossed the room, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a slim leather folder. Inside were copies of board voting rights agreements, some signed years ago, others more recent, all carefully kept without Marcus's knowledge. Alongside them was a list, names of allies, people who owed her favors, people Marcus had underestimated. Her fingers traced the list like reading Braille. Each name was a piece of the weapon she was about to assemble. For a moment, she let herself sink into the chair. Closing her eyes, she could still hear the echo of the ballroom, the crack of the slap, the sharp inhale of 100 witnesses. The humiliation was still there, but it had cooled into something harder, sharper. She opened her eyes and looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below. "You wanted a spectacle, Marcus," she whispered to herself. "Tomorrow, I'll give you one." Her phone buzzed again. Marcus Hale. "First 2 board members on our side. The rest will follow once they hear why." "Good," she replied aloud, though there was no one to hear her. She glanced at the clock. Midnight was less than 2 hours away. In the corporate world, that was a dangerous hour. Too late for damage control, too early for a defense, exactly the time she planned to strike. The baby shifted again, and she placed her hand over the movement. "We're going to be fine," she murmured, a promise as much to herself as to the child. Somewhere downtown, Marcus was probably raising another glass, confident that the worst thing his wife could do was leave quietly. He had no idea she was about to take everything he valued and leave him with the empty shell of his own pride. And by the time the sun rose, Marcus Thorne would wake to find that the company he had built was no longer his. While Isabella was in the quiet sanctuary of her old office, back at the gala, the night refused to end. The slap had left a ripple in the air, but Marcus was determined to stitch it shut with expensive liquor and louder laughter. He'd returned to the center of the ballroom, arm locked with Sienna's, flashing the kind of grin that made photographers forget they'd seen anything scandalous. But beneath that carefully composed smile, something darker churned. He could feel the eyes. Not the admiring eyes he was used to, but assessing ones. Calculating, suspicious. The people in this room weren't just socialites. They were investors, politicians, and board members. And they had just witnessed him lose control. From the far end of the room, Richard Lom, senior board member, with silver hair and shrewd eyes, watched the couple. He had been with Thorne Development since before Marcus inherited the company. Marcus had always thought of him as an old man too cautious to be a threat. Tonight, however, Richard's gaze lingered on the empty space where Isabella had stood. He didn't approve of public messes, especially messes that might cost him money. Sienna leaned in to whisper, her perfume sweet and intrusive. "Don't let it get to you," she cooed. "She's just emotional." Marcus swallowed the last of his scotch, forcing the heat down his throat. Emotional was not the word he would use for Isabella. Strategic, yes. Dangerous, possibly. He'd been so sure he'd broken her months ago when she left the company floor and stopped questioning his decisions. But tonight had reminded him that silence was not the same as surrender. Across the room, two junior board members, Claire Duval and Henry Cho, were locked in a low, urgent conversation. Their eyes darted between Marcus and the ballroom doors. They were young enough to still be swayed by influence, but smart enough to know that the company's image was as fragile as the crystal stemware in their hands. And right now, that image had a crack running through it. "Did you see his face?" Claire murmured. "I saw everyone's face," Henry replied, sipping champagne to mask the words. "If this goes public." "It will," Claire interrupted. "There were cameras." Henry's jaw tightened. "Then maybe it's time we start thinking about contingencies." At another table closer to the stage, the mayor's aide typed something into his phone. The message would find its way to the mayor within minutes, and from there to the real power brokers in the city. Marcus's relationships were built on an image of control, stability, and charm. The slap had shaken all three. The jazz band resumed, but the notes felt thinner, as though the music itself knew something had shifted. Conversations picked up again, but the undercurrent had changed. What had been an evening of celebration was now a web of whispered speculation. Marcus, sensing the shift, decided to make a show of dominance. He clinked his glass, drawing the attention of the room. "A toast," he announced, his voice booming with forced warmth. "To Thorne Development, the past, the present, and the incredible future ahead." The crowd responded with polite applause, but it was softer than usual. Some lifted their glasses out of habit, others out of obligation. Marcus scanned their faces, searching for reassurance. Instead, he found distance. Sienna squeezed his arm. "You're fine," she whispered. But Marcus knew better. A seed had been planted tonight, and it wasn't loyalty. Outside, in the service corridor just beyond the ballroom, two catering staff whispered over trays of half-empty glasses. "That was his wife, right?" one asked. "Yeah," the other replied. "I heard she used to have an office on the top floor. Designed the damn building." The first one let out a low whistle. "Guess she's not done with him." Back on the main floor, Richard Lom finally approached Marcus. "We need to talk," he said quietly, his tone carrying the weight of decades of boardroom battles. Marcus forced a smile. "Tomorrow, Richard. Tonight's for celebrating." "Tomorrow might be too late," Richard replied, then walked away without another word. The comment clung to Marcus like a bad scent. He poured himself another drink, ignoring Sienna's disapproving glance. He needed to remind himself who he was. Untouchable, unstoppable. But as he raised the glass, he caught sight of Claire and Henry speaking to Richard in the corner, their heads bent together like conspirators. He told himself they were talking about something else. He almost believed it. Meanwhile, across the city, Isabella was on the phone with Marcus Hale. His voice was calm, but urgent. "I've already spoken to Claire and Henry. They're leaning our way. Richard's next. He won't protect Marcus if it means risking his own shares." Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in. The baby shifted again, almost as if responding to the quiet triumph in her chest. Hale continued, "You understand? Once we start this process, there's no undoing it. By morning, the board will have to choose between him and the company." "They'll choose the company," Isabella said softly. "And I'll make sure they know I am the company." Her old office felt less like a relic now and more like a command center. On her desk, she spread out the documents from the leather folder, arranging them in the order they'd be needed. Her mind moved through the sequence: calls to make, leverage to apply, the exact moment to release the footage of the slap to the press. She had thought about revenge before, in flashes of anger, but this was different. This was strategy. This was war. And Marcus had fired the first public shot. Back at the gala, the tension was building in ways Marcus didn't yet understand. The alliances he thought were solid were already beginning to shift beneath him. Every handshake tonight carried a question. Every smile had a shadow behind it. The night wound down slowly, the last guests trickling out, murmuring their polite goodbyes. Marcus stood near the exit, offering each of them the charm he was famous for. But when Richard passed him without a handshake, Marcus felt the smallest crack in his armor. Sienna slipped into her coat, her voice a purr. "Come on, let's go home." Marcus nodded, but as they stepped into the waiting car, he glanced back at the empty ballroom. The chandeliers still glittered, but the room felt colder, emptier. He didn't know it yet, but the gala hadn't been a celebration. It had been the opening move of a game he was no longer winning. And while Marcus believed the night was over, Isabella was just beginning to play her hand. The footage surfaced at 5:47 a.m. It began as a 30-second clip posted by an anonymous account on a gossip site known for swallowing reputations whole. The shaky camera phone video caught the glimmer of the chandeliers, the polished marble floor, and then Marcus's hand connecting sharply with Isabella's face. The slap was crisp, echoing across the ballroom, even through the grainy audio. The pregnant curve of her belly was unmistakable under the blue dress. Within minutes, it was on every platform. By 6:15, hashtags bearing their names were trending globally. Screenshots of Sienna's smirk in the background became memes, each caption sharper than the last. Morning news anchors murmured about a shocking incident while legal analysts speculated on possible consequences. Marcus woke to the sound of his phone vibrating relentlessly on the nightstand. He blinked at the sunlight spilling across the bedroom, his head pounding from the whiskey. Sienna stirred beside him, scrolling her own phone, her expression frozen. "Marcus," her voice was thin. "It's everywhere." He reached for his own device, thumbing through the flood of missed calls, messages, and news alerts. When he finally saw the video, his stomach dropped. It wasn't just the act, it was the context. The way Isabella had looked at him afterward, calm and steady, had translated on camera into something dangerous. Composure. Sienna was saying something, damage control, statements, lawyers, but the words blurred. Marcus's mind was already racing ahead. Who had filmed it? Who had sent it out? And why so fast? The answer, he suspected, was sitting in that old office downtown, hands on a leather folder. By 7 a.m., Thorne Development's PR director was at the penthouse, hair unbrushed, still in yesterday's clothes. "We need a statement now," she said, setting her laptop on the coffee table. "Something apologetic, something about stress, a misunderstanding." "Absolutely not," Marcus cut in. "We don't apologize for private matters." "This wasn't private," she snapped. "You did it in front of 300 people, half of whom own stock in your company, the other half work for the press." Marcus's jaw clenched. He turned to Sienna. "I'll handle this." But the problem was already out of his hands. At 7:23, an emergency board meeting was scheduled for noon. The alert hit Marcus's inbox like a warning shot. He called Richard Lom immediately, but the call went to voicemail. He left a terse message, then tried Claire and Henry. Neither answered. By 8 o'clock, financial blogs were running op-eds about corporate ethics and leadership optics. A former Thorne Development executive tweeted that Isabella had been the true visionary behind the company's flagship building. Her followers ran with it, reframing Isabella from humiliated spouse to wronged architect. Meanwhile, Isabella sat at her desk in the 27th floor office, the morning light spilling across her papers. She'd been awake all night, orchestrating calls, feeding the right people just enough information to act. The video had been sent to the gossip site by a friend of hers, a friend who owed her more than one favor. She watched the news coverage without flinching. The clip played again and again, each time solidifying the narrative. Marcus Thorne, abusive and arrogant. Isabella Rossi Thorne, poised and pregnant. Marcus Hale called at 8:15. The meeting is set. Richard's on our side. Claire and Henry, too. That's enough to force a leadership vote if we move fast. Move, Isabella said simply. She hung up and stared at the skyline. Every step was unfolding as she'd mapped it. She thought of her father again, the way he'd measured twice before cutting once. That was how she'd built this moment. Precise, patient, inevitable. Back at the penthouse, Marcus paced like a caged animal. "They can't do this," he muttered. "I am the company." Sienna hovered near the kitchen island, sipping coffee she didn't seem to taste. "Maybe you should just go in there humble. Say you were stressed. Apologize to her." Marcus spun on her. Apologize to her? After everything she's... He stopped himself. Too much truth was dangerous even here. His PR director slammed her laptop shut. "If you walk into that boardroom angry, they'll vote you out before dessert. This isn't about her anymore. It's about your image. And right now, your image is toxic." By 9:30, the markets had opened and Thorne Development stock dipped 3 points. Not catastrophic yet, but enough to get the attention of shareholders who didn't care about marital drama, only numbers. Isabella's phone buzzed again. This time it was a reporter she trusted. "I have the footage," the woman said. "But I also have quotes from 3 board members saying you should take over." "Run them," Isabella replied. The headline went live at 10:02. Board members questioned Marcus Thorne's leadership after public altercation. Beneath it was a still frame of Marcus's raised hand and Isabella's calm, unblinking stare. In the comments, strangers debated her life as if they knew it. Some called her brave, others pitted her. A few questioned her motives. She read none of it. Public opinion was a river, always moving, impossible to hold. She only needed it flowing in her direction long enough to reach the next shore. At 11:15, Marcus stood before his wardrobe, selecting the armor of the day. Charcoal suit, blue tie. He caught his reflection in the mirror and saw for the first time a flicker of uncertainty in his own eyes. He hated it. Downstairs, his driver waited. The ride to headquarters was silent, except for the hum of the engine. The city outside seemed colder, harder, as if it too had seen the video. Isabella arrived 10 minutes earlier, walking through the lobby with her head high. The security guard nodded, no hesitation this time. Employees glanced up from their desks as she passed, whispers trailing in her wake. On the 30th floor, the boardroom was already half full. Richard sat at the head of the table, papers neatly stacked. Claire and Henry were to his left, speaking quietly. When Isabella entered, all three looked up, and something passed between them. A silent agreement. Marcus arrived moments later. The air shifted, charged with unspoken history. He took his seat opposite Isabella, his expression a mask. Richard cleared his throat. "We're here to discuss the leadership and future of Thorn development in light of recent events." Marcus leaned back, forcing a smirk. "Recent events being my personal life?" "Recent events being your public behavior," Richard corrected. "Which has financial consequences, significant ones." Isabella said nothing, only watching him. The silence pressed in heavier than any argument. For the first time in years, Marcus felt the ground beneath him tilt. And when Richard slid the vote sheet across the table, Marcus realized this was not a meeting. It was his execution. The boardroom was a glass box in the morning light. The city spread like a hard, glittering map on every side. Coffee steamed in white porcelain cups. Legal pads waited, crisp and unused. A bowl of pale green orchids sat in the center of the table, delicate and absurd against the tension that crackled in the air. Chairs scraped. Pens clicked. A projector hummed to life. Pulses quickened. Throats dried. Eyes avoided other eyes. Unspoken calculations, debts remembered, favors weighed. Richard adjusted his glasses and looked around the table. "Let's come to order." His voice carried decades of rooms just like this. "This emergency session is about leadership, fiduciary duty, and risk." Marcus leaned back as if on a throne he had commissioned. The charcoal suit was immaculate, the smile engineered, but a vein pulsed at his temple. He scanned faces, Claire, Henry, the outside counsel dialing in, the compliance chief staring at the folder before her. He did not look at Isabella. Sienna had not been invited. He resented that more than he admitted. Richard nodded to the compliance chief. "Miss Patel, please summarize what's changed since last night." "Share price down 3.8% in the first hour," she said, her voice precise. "Advertisers and anchor tenants requesting meetings. Our primary lender transmitted a covenant review notice at 10:07. Morals clause may be implicated. HR received 2 internal complaints. Hostile environment. Reputational harm." Marcus raised a hand, polite but cutting. "Are we making governance decisions based on gossip clips?" "It's not gossip when it's on every screen," Henry said softly. He didn't look up, but his tone had spine. The projector flickered, revealing a slide. Headlines time-stamped the frozen frame of the slap. A heat rose in Marcus's chest, that familiar heat that demanded obedience. "Don't let them smell fear. Never let them smell fear." Richard folded his hands. "Marcus, you can speak. Then, Mrs. Thorn. After that, we proceed." Marcus stood with practiced gravitas. A personal moment, taken out of context, has been weaponized. "I regret the distraction, but our results are clear. Record quarters. A pipeline others dream about. Thorn development doesn't need a morality play. It needs leadership. My leadership." His eyes finally cut to Isabella, only for a heartbeat, as if daring her to meet him where he was strongest. She didn't move. He sat. Isabella rose without hurry. The room seemed to brace as she placed a hand on the table, the other resting lightly on her belly. Her voice was level. "I won't retell what everyone has seen. I'll speak about this company." She opened a leather folder. Paper whispered. Her heart thudded once, heavy, then steadied as if finding its cadence. Measure twice, cut once. I joined Thorn at its birth, she continued. I helped shape its first headquarters. I wrote the design guidelines that brought in the anchor tenants we still have today. I met with investors when our brand was a rented suit and a dream. I stepped back when marriage blurred lines, but I never stopped caring for the building I helped raise. She slid 3 documents forward. Exhibit A, a letter from our primary lender expressing concern about management conduct inconsistent with community standards and reserving rights under Section 11.3b. Exhibit B, a joint note from 2 of our top 4 tenants requesting assurance by today of a stable governance plan. Exhibit C, a memorandum of understanding signed last year by this board, allowing for immediate interim leadership in case of extraordinary events affecting the company's reputation or financial relationships. Richard glanced down, his brow lifting a millimeter. He remembered the MOU. He had insisted on the language. He hadn't imagined using it like this. Marcus forced a chuckle that landed like a dropped glass. So now you're a lawyer, too. I'm an architect, Isabella said. I know how to calculate load-bearing points. Silence settled, taut and surgical. A conference speaker pinged. The lender's representative joined, voice tinned by distance. We won't dictate governance, but we need to see steps that restore stakeholder confidence. Today. Jitters skittered along several spines. The clock was now a blade. Richard turned to Marcus. Anything further? Marcus rose again, his voice dipped in steel. Let's be honest, this is a coup staged by a scorned spouse. He pointed toward Claire and Henry, you will regret letting personal theatrics run a Fortune 500 balance sheet. Claire's jaw tightened. She tapped her pen once, the sound small and decisive. Here's what I regret, watching our CEO hit his pregnant wife on camera. You built a company, Marcus. You also just built a crisis. Isabella didn't look at Claire. She looked at the orchids, absurd and calm, and thought of her mother's hands arranging flowers at a cheap kitchen table. Dignity is not loud, her mother had said. It's steady. Richard cleared his throat. Motion on the floor. Effective immediately, Marcus Thorne is suspended as CEO and chair pending review. The board will appoint an interim executive chair for 90 days, renewable, with authority to implement a stabilization plan. The words filled the glass box like cold air. Marcus laughed, incredulous, then dangerous. You don't have the votes. Isabella lifted another sheet. Proxy letters. 5 independent shareholders signed overnight. They request leadership appropriate to the company's stated values. How did you? Marcus began, then bit it back. He knew how. She still knew where the load-bearing points were. Pens poised, eyes down. Hearts hammered. Some with relief, some with dread. A chapter closed, another opened. Cost unknown. Richard looked around. We vote. All in favor. Hands rose. Claire first. Henry next. Miss Patel. The outside director from Zurich on the screen. Richard lifted his own last, like a gavel. All opposed. Marcus raised his hand, alone. The motion is carried. The words did not shout. They landed with the weight of poured concrete. Sienna's name flashed on Marcus's phone, ignored. He stared at Isabella, expecting gloating, triumph, anything he could strike against. He found composure instead. The same composure that made the video so lethal. Richard continued, next motion, appoint Isabella Rossi Thorne as executive chair. For CEO functions, we elevate COO James Tremaine as acting CEO to ensure operational continuity. Heads nodded. It was sensible, boring, precisely what lenders wanted to hear. Isabella had advocated that arrangement in last night's calls. She didn't need the title to wield the power. She needed the power to fix the bleeding. Marcus's voice dropped to a growl. You don't have the competence. You have a grudge. Isabella met his eyes, steady. I have a plan. She slid a stapled document across. The stabilization plan. Tenant calls at 2 o'clock. Lender update at 4 o'clock. A public statement at 6 o'clock. A governance task force with outside ethics council by week's end. Relief and resolve braided in her chest. This isn't vengeance. This is repair. The vote was quicker this time. Carried. Richard exhaled. Security will escort Mr. Thorne for device collection and access revocation. Marcus, you'll receive notice of the review parameters within the hour. For a breath, the city went soundless beyond the glass. Then the building's HVAC whispered and footsteps approached from the hall. Marcus's chair scraped back. You think you can erase me? The name on this tower is mine. No, Isabella said almost gently. It was ours. You decided otherwise. A memory rose unbidden, the two of them on a concrete slab before the atrium existed, wind in their hair, marker stains on their fingers, his arms slung around her shoulders as he said, "We'll build something that outlives us." She had believed him. Perhaps he had believed himself once. The door opened. 2 security officers waited, eyes averted, respectful. Rage flashed through Marcus, hot and blinding, then ebbing to a metallic taste. Don't beg. Don't break. Not here. He straightened his jacket. Enjoy the optics, he said to the room. To Isabella, this isn't over. She didn't answer. She was already turning the plan's first page. Richard gathered the orchids and set them gently aside, as if clearing the center of the table for new blueprints. We have press waiting in the lobby, he said. Mrs. Thorne, are you ready? Isabella inhaled once, slow. The baby nudged, a small, insistent reminder of what mattered beyond glass and steel. Measure twice, she told herself one last time. Then step forward. She rose, and as the boardroom door swung open to a wall of cameras and questions, Isabella realized the most dangerous part wasn't winning the vote. It was what she had to say next. The sun had barely risen, but the city was already alive with the metallic buzz of early morning traffic and the hum of news vans idling outside the Thorne Holdings building. Satellite dishes sprouted like awkward flowers from their roofs, each one angled toward the glass facade where Marcus Thorne's empire operated. Inside the lobby, the marble floor reflected the staccato flashes of cameras as reporters jostled for position, their voices a chaotic chorus. Marcus, is it true your wife now controls the majority stake? Mr. Thorne, do you have a statement about the board's emergency vote? Marcus, will you resign as CEO? The questions landed like blows, each one chipping away at the composure he was so famous for. He ignored them all, his jaw locked, his eyes hidden behind dark aviators. But the tension showed in the stiff set of his shoulders, in the way his hand tightened around the strap of his leather briefcase. In the penthouse suite 30 floors above, Sienna Vance, the mistress, paced barefoot on the cold hardwood, her silk robe fluttering around her knees. The city stretched out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, indifferent to her panic. The muted TV screen showed Marcus arriving at the building. The scrolling headline in bold read, Thorne Power Shift, Wife Holds Controlling Shares. She muted the sound but couldn't block the image of Isabella's calm, composed face from her mind. Her pulse thudded in her ears, matching the restless tapping of her foot. Her throat was dry, yet the taste in her mouth was metallic, bitter. She remembered the last conversation with Marcus, his voice low, confident, assuring her that Izzy will fold. She's not built for this kind of fight. The memory curdled in her chest now. She's not supposed to win. She's not supposed to matter anymore. I'm supposed to be the one on his arm, in the boardroom, in the papers. How did she turn it around so fast? The thought stung worse than jealousy. It was the cold fear of someone who realized they might have bet on the wrong man. Marcus's morning was no better. In the boardroom, the tension was palpable. The directors avoided his gaze, their eyes fixed on the thick stack of documents before them. Isabella's move had been surgical. An emergency vote called at dawn with enough allies flipping sides to strip Marcus of his decision-making majority. "She's leveraging the sustainability division's expansion," one director murmured. "She's got the shareholders on her side," another replied quietly. The words weren't meant for Marcus, but they reached him anyway. Each one was another nail in the coffin of his authority. At that same moment, Isabella sat in her lawyer's office, a warm cup of chamomile tea cradled in her hands. The morning light streamed through the blinds, catching in her hair, turning it almost gold. Her expression was serene, but her fingers tapped lightly against the porcelain mug, a barely perceptible rhythm of anticipation. Her chest felt lighter than it had in years, though her heart still carried the dull ache of betrayal. The sight of Marcus slapping her, the sting on her skin, the cold humiliation in front of Sienna. It was all still there, but it no longer controlled her. "This isn't revenge for me. It's protection for my child, for the life he deserves. If Marcus wants war, I'll give him one, but it will be the kind he can't win with money or charm." Her lawyer, David Holbrook, leaned forward. "The press is circling. They'll want a statement. If we don't give one, Marcus will control the narrative." She sipped her tea, considering. "Let him talk. The more he tries to defend himself, the more he'll reveal." In the penthouse, Sienna's phone rang. It was Marcus. She hesitated before answering, letting it buzz twice more, as if buying herself time to pull the silk robe tighter, to summon the sultry confidence she was known for. When she picked up, his voice was low, tight. "Pack a bag. We're leaving the city for a few days." Her stomach flipped. "Leaving, Marcus? The press?" "I said pack. I'll explain later." "He's running. God, he's actually running. That's not the man I signed up for." Down on the street, a reporter broke from the crowd, chasing Marcus's black car as it pulled away from the building. "Mr. Thorne, how does it feel to be outmaneuvered by your pregnant wife?" The question sliced through the morning air like a thrown knife. Marcus didn't answer, but inside the car, his hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles blanched. His reflection in the rearview mirror was a stranger, one who'd lost control and didn't know how to get it back. A tightness coiled in his gut, heavier than anger. It was the slow, creeping dread of a man realizing he had underestimated the wrong opponent. "She's not the same woman I left, and God help me, I don't know what she's going to do next." Back in her lawyer's office, Isabella glanced at her phone. A text from an unknown number lit the screen. "He's not done yet. Watch your back." She read it twice, her eyes narrowing slightly, the corner of her mouth lifting in something that wasn't quite a smile. She had been expecting this. What she hadn't expected was who the message was from. The message on Isabella's phone was still glowing when David Holbrook noticed her expression change. "Something wrong?" he asked, watching her set the device face down on the desk. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the heating system. Sunlight traced thin lines across the oak table, catching on the edges of the contract spread before them. Isabella's pulse ticked up, a subtle tightening in her chest. "It's been years since I saw his name. Why now? And why warn me?" She shook her head lightly. "Nothing urgent. Let's go over the press statement draft." But in her mind, the words from the message kept circling. A familiar handwriting transposed into digital type. She hadn't heard from Elias Carter since the day he left Thorne Development under a cloud of rumors. Back then, Marcus had called it creative differences, but Isabella knew better. Elias had discovered irregularities in the acquisition books, and Marcus had made sure he was exiled before he could speak. Now Elias was reaching out to her. And if his warning was real, Marcus wasn't retreating. He was repositioning. Across town, Marcus sat in the back of a private club's mahogany-paneled dining room. The air smelled of cigars and aged whiskey, the quiet murmur of other conversations providing cover. In front of him was a man in a charcoal three-piece suit, his cufflinks gleaming discreetly under the dim light. A single crystal tumbler of scotch sat between them, untouched. Marcus's stomach was a knot, but his voice stayed smooth. If the board wants war, they'll get war. Isabella thinks she's got the upper hand. She doesn't know the people I can bring into this. The man across from him was Victor Crane, a financier with a reputation for corporate takeovers as swift as they were ruthless. Marcus had once avoided working with him, the kind of man who treated laws as polite suggestions. Now, necessity stripped away those reservations. She's holding the shares, Marcus said. But I can make them worthless, Victor replied. Leverage debt, trigger covenants, force asset sales. If she's not holding anything valuable, the throne's empty again. Marcus nodded slowly, his mind already turning over the angles. Do it quietly. And make it hurt. Back in her lawyer's office, Isabella excused herself for a moment and stepped into the hallway. She dialed the number she had memorized years ago but never used again. Elias answered on the second ring. You got my message, he said without preamble. I did, Isabella replied. She leaned against the cool wall, the faint scent of fresh paint in the corridor. A mix of weariness and curiosity curled through her. I need to know if you're here for justice or revenge of your own. Marcus is reaching out to Victor Crane, Elias said. If Crane moves, the company's assets could be locked or devalued before you can stabilize. And you're telling me this because I know what that man cost me, and I see he's about to cost you more. A pause. Also, because I still have files from when I was CFO. Files Marcus never knew I kept. Her mind clicked into strategy mode. Send them to me. Not over the phone, Elias said. Meet me tonight. 9 o'clock, the old Piermont warehouse. She hesitated only a beat. I'll be there. Meanwhile, Sienna sat in the penthouse, the robe gone, replaced by jeans and a loose sweater. She stared at her phone, scrolling through headlines, each one worse than the last. Rain had begun to patter against the wide glass windows. Her throat tightened every time Isabella's name appeared. If Marcus goes down, I go down with him. I need to find a way out before that happens. She opened a messaging app and typed quickly, we need to talk. I have information you'll want. She addressed it to an unlisted number, one that didn't belong to Marcus. By late afternoon, Isabella's legal team had finished the draft press statement. It was measured, professional, and impossible to twist. Thorne Development affirms its commitment to ethical leadership and operational excellence. The board has appointed Isabella Rossi Thorne as executive chair to ensure stability during this transition. She approved it without changing a word. Outside the window, the sky had shifted to that muted gold of early evening. The city was slowing but never stopping. Her muscles ached from hours of stillness in meetings, but her mind was sharper than it had been in years. Tonight could change everything again. At 8:45 p.m., Isabella arrived at the Piermont warehouse. The building loomed in the dark, its rusted metal siding whispering with the wind coming off the river. She stepped inside, her heels echoing on the concrete floor. The air smelled faintly of oil and damp wood. Elias was already there, leaning against a pillar, a slim briefcase at his side. He looked older, lines carved deeper into his face, but his eyes were alert. She felt a flicker of something like trust, though she buried it quickly. If this is a trap, I need to be ready. He set the briefcase on a nearby table, snapping it open. Inside were neatly organized folders, each labeled with dates and project codes. These, Elias said, are the acquisition files from the Rivergate project. Marcus funneled millions into side accounts through shell companies. It's fraud, and if it comes out, he's not just losing the company, he's facing prison. Isabella's breath was steady, but her pulse quickened. She flipped through the documents, the weight of the paper oddly satisfying in her hands. "What do you want for these?" she asked. "Nothing," Elias said. "Just make sure he can't do to you what he did to me." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain outside had picked up, drumming softly against the warehouse roof. She closed the briefcase and looked at him. "This will end him." Elias's mouth twitched. "Then you'd better be ready for what comes after." She was about to respond when her phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo. Marcus sitting in a dimly lit room with Victor Crane leaning in close, papers spread between them. The caption read, "He moves tonight." And in that moment, Isabella realized she wasn't the only one planning a strike before morning. The rain had stopped by dawn, leaving the city washed and sharp-edged. Isabella stood in front of her bathroom mirror, the steam from the shower curling into the air around her. For the first time in months, she didn't see exhaustion in her own eyes. She saw focus. The marble countertop was littered with makeup brushes, compacts, and the silk scarf she'd once worn during investor tours. The morning light slanted in through the tall window, catching the faint shimmer of her dress, a deep emerald, cut to move with her instead of constricting her. Her hands were steady as she applied a final line of eyeliner. She hadn't dressed like this for Marcus in years. She wasn't dressing for him now. "If they're going to see me, they'll see the woman who built this, not the one he tried to break." David Holbrook arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, a folder under his arm. "Your first interview is at 10 o'clock, then the shareholder luncheon. Cameras everywhere." "I want them," Isabella said simply. "Let them record everything." While Isabella prepared for her re-emergence, Marcus sat in Victor Crane's private office. The blinds were drawn, the room heavy with the scent of leather and old paper. Victor slid a set of documents across the desk. Complex financial instruments that could drain Thorn Development's liquidity within days. Marcus tapped a pen against the table, the click echoing in the dim room. His confidence was a thin shell held together by habit. "If she wants to play public, I'll play private. By the time she realizes, it'll be too late." Victor leaned back. "By tonight, half her war chest will be frozen. She won't be able to fund her projects. Investors will panic." Marcus nodded, a grim smile on his face. "Do it." At 9:30, Isabella's car pulled up to the steps of the city's most exclusive business club. Reporters swarmed instantly, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. The sound was a roar. Questions overlapping, shutters snapping, her heels clicking steadily on the stone. The hum in her chest wasn't nerves. It was energy, sharp and clean. "Let them look. Let them write. I'll feed them the truth I choose." Inside, she took the stage at the shareholder luncheon. Her emerald dress caught the light. Her posture was a study in command. She spoke without notes. "Thorn Development," she began, "is not just a company. It is a vision built brick by brick, deal by deal, on the trust of those who invest their time, money, and belief in us. That trust was shaken this week. My job is to restore it completely." Heads nodded around the room. Pens scribbled. Phones recorded. Her pulse quickened when she caught sight of a familiar face in the back. Sienna. What is she doing here? Sienna approached after the speech, her smile brittle. "Nice speech, Izzy. Very presidential. Why are you here?" Isabella asked flatly. "I thought you might want to know," Sienna said, lowering her voice, "that Marcus isn't just licking his wounds. He's coming for the company's accounts, and he's using Victor Crane to do it." Isabella didn't react outwardly. And you're telling me this because? Because when he goes down, I don't want to go with him. Sienna's eyes flickered with something between fear and calculation. And maybe because I don't like being the second act in someone else's play. By noon, Isabella was back in her office, Elias Carter waiting with a laptop. Crane's moves are traceable, he said, fingers flying across the keys. If we catch him in the act, we can not only block him, we can make it public. That would make Marcus radioactive to any serious investor. The laptop screen glowed in the dimmed office, numbers scrolling like code in a spy thriller. Isabella felt a spark of satisfaction watching the trap take shape. This isn't just defense anymore. This is the strike. At 2 o'clock, David Holbrook returned from a call with the bank. They've agreed to delay any action on the accounts until they speak with you directly. That gives us a window. Small, but enough. Isabella nodded. Good. Get me a meeting with the head of compliance at 4 o'clock and call the press. We're adding a public Q&A to tonight's event. By late afternoon, the transformation was complete. The cautious, retreating figure Marcus had pushed out of the boardroom months ago was gone. In her place was a leader, sharp, unshaken, visibly in control. The event hall's chandeliers blazed to life as the first guests arrived. The press clustered at the back, their cameras trained on the stage. Isabella's breath was steady. Her hands rested lightly on the podium as she waited for the signal. This is where I bury the image he built of me and replace it with the truth. She began the Q&A with controlled precision, addressing financial stability, project timelines, and governance reforms. Each answer was confident, concise, and on message. The investors leaned forward, reassured. Then a reporter in the second row stood. Mrs. Thorne, what do you say to allegations that Marcus Thorne is actively working to undermine Thorne Development's financial stability? A hush fell over the room. Cameras zoomed in. Isabella felt the tiniest smile tug at her lips. Thank you for asking exactly what I wanted on record. I say this, Isabella replied. Any attempt to destabilize this company will be met with immediate and decisive action. We have systems in place, evidence on file, and the full support of our shareholders to protect what we've built. Thorne Development will not be bullied by anyone, no matter their last name. The room erupted in applause. In a corner, Elias sent a silent text to her phone. Crane's funds are moving now. We're in. She stepped away from the podium, excusing herself just long enough to read the next line of the message. You have 1 hour to pull the trigger. After that, the trail goes cold. And as Isabella walked back into the bright lights, she knew the next move wouldn't just defend her empire. It would decide who owned it by midnight. The applause from the Q&A still echoed in Isabella's ears as she stepped backstage, the heat from the stage lights fading against her skin. David Holbrook was already there, phone in hand, urgency in his eyes. They're moving the money now, he said. Elias has everything. Account numbers, transfer logs, shell companies. If we file with the SEC before the funds settle, it's game over. The hallway smelled faintly of coffee and fresh paint. The buzz of conversation from the ballroom seeped through the heavy curtains. Isabella's heartbeat slowed deliberately. She had trained herself to think in a crisis, not react. This is it. If I pull this thread, Marcus doesn't just lose the company. He loses the illusion of untouchability. She nodded once. Do it. File everything and send copies to 3 major financial outlets. If the SEC doesn't act fast enough, public outrage will. Meanwhile, across the city, Marcus sat in Victor Crane's office, watching a screen where numbers shifted like a private language. By the time she realizes what's happening, Crane said, her liquidity will be gone. She'll be chair of an empty shell. The blinds were half closed, casting striped shadows across the desk. Marcus's chest loosened slightly at the thought of her scrambling, calling in favors too late. You can't outplay me, Izzy. You were good in the design room. I live in the fight. But then Crane's assistant walked in, pale. Sir, you need to see this. She handed him a tablet. The headline blazed in bold, SEC receives evidence of fraud involving Victor Crane Holdings and Marcus Thorne. Beneath it, subheadlines from 3 different financial news sites detailed shell companies, diverted funds, and project codes that matched the Rivergate acquisition. Marcus's blood went cold. How the hell? She had it ready, Crane muttered, already moving to shut down systems. She baited us. Back at the event, Isabella returned to the ballroom as though nothing had happened. The corners of her mouth were set in a serene half-smile. Guests mingled with champagne glasses. The low murmur of deals being made floated under the chandeliers. A string quartet played softly in the corner, the notes weaving between conversations. Relief was dangerous. It could make you slow. She pushed it aside, keeping her focus sharp. He's not finished yet. Not until he has no choice. Elias slipped in through a side entrance, making his way to her. It's done. The SEC is confirming receipt. The media is running with it. By morning, Crane will be toxic and Marcus. Well, he'll be radioactive. Good, she said, her voice even. Now, we wait. But the wait was shorter than anyone expected. At 9:47 p.m., David's phone buzzed with a message from a contact at one of the financial outlets. Marcus is on his way here. Wants to set the record straight live on camera. The air in the ballroom seemed to tighten. The music was suddenly too delicate for the room. Isabella's mind moved instantly. Marcus on camera meant an opportunity to lock the narrative in her favor, in front of millions. If he wants a stage, I'll stand on it with him. And I'll make sure the lights burn. When Marcus arrived 20 minutes later, he walked straight through the main doors, cameras following him like a comet's tail. He was still in the same suit, but the polish was cracked, his tie slightly askew, his hair a fraction less precise. The media outlet had set up a live broadcast corner inside the event hall, lights glaring, microphones ready. Marcus stepped up first, gripping the lectern. This so-called evidence, he began, his voice steady but tight, is nothing more than a smear campaign by someone desperate to hold on to power she never earned. Isabella stepped forward, her heels clicking once, twice, 3 times on the marble before she came to stand beside him. Power I never earned, she said, her voice carrying without effort. Tell them, Marcus. Did I not design the flagship headquarters? Did I not bring in the Rivergate investors you then diverted funds from? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Camera shutters stuttered like applause. Marcus's jaw twitched, a flicker of panic breaking through. Stay composed. Deny everything. Don't give her the moment. That's a lie, he said, forcing a laugh. She didn't look at him. Instead, she looked directly into the nearest camera. The documents are public. They've been filed with the SEC and sent to every major financial news outlet. Transparency isn't optional anymore. The reporter hosting the broadcast seized the moment. Mr. Thorne, do you deny setting up shell companies to divert funds from Rivergate acquisitions? Marcus's mouth opened, then closed. The hesitation was fatal. A camera light blinked red. The feed was live. Isabella felt the tide shift in real time. This is the image they'll remember. Not the slap, not the scandal. This. Answer the question, Marcus, Isabella said softly, but it carried. He didn't. The silence was louder than any denial. The host turned to Isabella. Mrs. Thorne, what does this mean for Thorne Development's future? It means, she said, her voice smooth and unwavering, that we will rebuild on a foundation of honesty, strength, and respect. And it means that no one, no matter their title, will be above the values this company was built on. The applause was immediate, rolling over the room in a wave. Marcus stepped back from the lectern, eyes scanning for an exit that wouldn't look like retreat. There wasn't one. Security lingered at the edges of the crowd, discreet but present. The weight in Isabella's chest eased, but only slightly. One more move. End it completely. As the broadcast wrapped, David leaned in close. The SEC just froze his personal accounts. Crane's too. Marcus caught the words, his face darkening. He turned toward Isabella, his voice low, sharp. You think this is over? You've just made enemies you can't imagine. She met his gaze without flinching. You made them first. The cameras were still rolling, catching every flicker of their expressions. And then, from the far side of the room, a voice cut through the applause, someone Isabella hadn't seen in years, someone who could ruin everything if they chose to speak. The voice sliced through the applause like a blade. Isabella. She turned slowly toward the sound. Standing near the edge of the crowd was a man in a dark suit, older now, but unmistakable. Robert Hale, the former auditor Marcus had forced out years ago after Hale uncovered accounting discrepancies that were quietly buried. The chandeliers above cast fractured light across his lined face. The murmur of the crowd dulled as though the room itself leaned in. Isabella's chest tightened, not in fear, but in recognition of a piece of the puzzle falling into place. If Hale's here, it's not by accident. Marcus saw him too, and his posture stiffened. You, he said, the single word dripping with venom. Hale ignored Marcus and walked straight to Isabella. I have something for you. It's not just Rivergate. It's years of transactions, offshore accounts, asset laundering. Enough to put him away for a decade, maybe more. He handed her a small flash drive, its metallic surface cold against her palm. Her fingers curled around it like a closing lock. This is the nail in the coffin. Marcus's voice rose, brittle with anger. You're conspiring now, in public. Isabella didn't look at him. No, Marcus, we're documenting. Reporters swarmed closer, sensing history unfolding in real time. The live feed caught every word, every tightening muscle in Marcus's jaw. David Holbrook appeared at her side, his voice low. We can walk this straight to the FBI office downtown tonight. They'll move faster than the SEC. She nodded, then addressed the crowd, her tone even but charged. Thorn Development will cooperate fully with every investigation, no matter where it leads, no matter who it involves. Gasps and murmurs rippled outward. Cameras craned for better angles. Marcus's face blanched and his eyes flicked toward the nearest exit. He's looking for a way out. There isn't one. Security was already moving, subtly closing ranks. A pair of uniformed officers entered from the back, likely called by the media outlet's legal team once the fraud allegations became public. Marcus took a step back. You won't survive this either, Izzy. When they drag me down, they'll drag you with me. She turned fully to him now, her voice quiet enough to make him lean in, ensuring the cameras caught the intimacy of the moment. No, Marcus. I survived you. This is nothing. The officers reached his side, speaking low. Marcus's reply was sharp, defensive. A strange calm settled over Isabella like a final storm passing. It's over for him, and for the version of me he thought would never fight back. The officers escorted Marcus toward the exit. Flashes erupted as he passed through the crowd, his name shouted not in admiration but in accusation. Victor Crane was nowhere to be seen, already in hiding, his name appearing on breaking news tickers across the country. Once Marcus was gone, Isabella turned back to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience tonight. Thorn Development's future is secure. We will rebuild better than before. The applause was thunderous this time, untainted by the tension that had shadowed the earlier ovation. Investors pressed forward to shake her hand, reporters shouted questions she didn't need to answer. Later, in the quiet of her office, she plugged the flash drive into her laptop. Hale's files were meticulous, damning in their detail. She forwarded them to David, to the FBI, and to a private archive she kept under a name only she knew. The desk lamp cast a warm pool of light across the papers still spread before her. She felt the slow exhale of months' worth of battle leaving her body. I thought winning would feel like revenge. It feels like breathing. Elias arrived a few minutes later, leaning in the doorway. It's done. He won't touch this company again. Good, she said. Now we make sure the people who built this place the right way get to keep building. He gave a small nod. You did well, Isabella. After he left, she walked to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. The lights below shimmered like a living map. Each one a story, a deal, a dream. She rested a hand on her belly. The baby kicked once, firm and sure. The glass was cool under her palm. A warmth bloomed in her chest that had nothing to do with the victory. We'll be okay. You'll grow up knowing strength isn't loud, it's steady. 5 years later, the autumn sun cast long shadows across a new city park, a vibrant space of green grass and laughing children that had once been a derelict industrial lot. At its center stood a striking pavilion of glass and reclaimed steel, a building that seemed to breathe with the light. Isabella stood on a small stage, her emerald dress a deliberate echo of the night she took back her life. Beside her, a 4-year-old boy with dark, curious eyes fidgeted with the ribbon on a ceremonial pair of scissors. The sign behind them read, "The Rossi Thorne Pavilion, a gift to the city." The applause was warm and genuine as she cut the ribbon, her son, Leo, clapping his hands in delight. She had not just rebuilt the company, she had reshaped its soul, pouring its profits and vision back into the community. The name Thorne remained, a reminder that history cannot be erased, but the name Rossi now stood first, a testament to the true architect of its future. Later, as Leo chased a butterfly near the fountains, Isabella's phone buzzed. It was a news alert with a small, grainy photo of Marcus, released from prison on parole, looking gaunt and unrecognizable. She glanced at it for a second, feeling not anger, not pity, but a profound and final distance. He was a ghost from a life that was no longer hers. She deleted the notification without a second thought and turned back to her son, who was now looking up at the pavilion, his face full of wonder. "Did you build that, Mommy?" he asked. Isabella knelt down, her eyes meeting his. "We did," she said softly, pulling him into a hug. "We built it together." And in the light of the setting sun, surrounded by the life and laughter she had helped create, she knew this was the only victory that had ever truly mattered. Isabella's journey is a powerful reminder that our greatest strength is often forged in our deepest struggles. It's a story of reclaiming your power, rewriting your narrative, and building a new future on your own terms. If her fight for dignity and justice resonated with you, if it sparked something in your own heart, then don't let that feeling fade. Subscribe to our channel and become part of a community that celebrates resilience and strength. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their story isn't over, and that they have the power to build something beautiful from the rubble. Click that subscribe button, and let's continue to share stories that inspire, empower, and remind you of the incredible strength you hold within.